right. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending the last session of the semester for this webinar series here from Peers. We will have Dr. Tina Malala from Educational Psychology, I believe. She will share with us about her experience integrating AI into teacher preparation program. So I will read her bio shortly, and then I will give the floor to her. Dr. Tina Malala is a clinical assistant professor of educational psychology at Texas A&M University with over 10 years of experience in K to 12 education. She works with both pre-service and in-service special education teachers, primarily at the undergraduate level, helping them integrate AI and other innovative practices into their classroom. Beyond her teaching, Dr. Malala is deeply engaged in the community, serving as a research practice partner with schools and districts, where she bridges the gap between research and real world practice. She is passionate about empowering future educators, build inclusive and innovative learning environment. Dr. Malala, feel free to start your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much for that introduction. So the title of this presentation is Integrating AI into Teacher Preparation Programs as a Tool to Reduce Potential Burnouts. So it's really important for those of you that don't have a K-12 background. I want to talk about why this is important and who I worked with on this for the most part. This was done in my Special Education 321 course. So this is a course with pre-service teachers who have never taught students with disabilities. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with special education or what a special education teacher does, it's important to know that their role is very different from a general education teacher. So a gen ed teacher will typically teach content like math, social studies, science, English. They may have students with disabilities in their class, but their role isn't the same as a special education teacher, where the special ed teacher is strictly focused on individualized support. So to be a special education teacher, it requires expertise and instruction, just like a general education teacher, but special education teachers also focus on behavioral support, compliance with legal documents around the student's needs, and then of course documenting how a student has progressed towards their goals. So this extends beyond teaching into those legal, ethical, and case management responsibilities. So the reality of a special education teacher also looks different, because in addition to planning around content, they also have to provide a lot of documentation per the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And so it's going to vary per student need. Generally speaking, every time a report card is issued, special education teachers also have to provide progress monitoring updates. But sometimes if a student demonstrates more moderate to severe needs, the documentation is much more frequent. So the special education teacher has to divide their time across students, meetings, and those meetings can be around their individual education plans. They can be around behavioral support. They can be around parent concerns around services. The meetings vary. And then compliance around that and collaborating with various professionals. So the special education teacher has to collaborate with the general education teacher, the school psychologist, the social worker, the audiologist, speech language pathologist, whoever works with the children that they serve. So very different from your typical general education teacher's workload. And then just thinking about the demands, I've kind of touched on this, but yes, a special education teacher is going to be responsible for both the academic part and behavioral support, which usually happens at the same time. And these supports have to be catered to individual needs. One of the biggest components of being a special education teacher is the individualized education plan, also known as an IEP. It is high stakes and legally binding. And the course that I taught, it's called Assessments for Students with Disabilities. The essence of this course was around interpreting an evaluation report and then being able to write an IEP. So these students took SPED 321 with me, and then the following semester they took a course where they actually wrote IEPs, and that was not with me. So there are two parts to this, and it requires a lot of precision and under time pressure. So usually the evaluation window is 60 days, but in Texas, teachers only have 45 days. And then 30 days after that, the IEP has to be written. So this is in addition to all of the background that I gave you around the academic and behavioral components. So it was really important that we explored AI in this course, given the many things that a special education teacher has to do. All right. And then I've kind of touched on progress monitoring. It's going to vary per child, but usually every 9 weeks, or when the report card is issued, special education teachers have to provide parents a copy of this in addition to the report cards. So the reality of a special education teacher is that they have limited time, but increasing administrative demands. And then I kind of jumped ahead, but when thinking about why this was important in this class in particular, when we're looking at assessments and eligibility determinations and evaluation reports, I wanted to see how AI might be able to support efficiency in high demand areas. So would AI be able to support with drafting or organizing those written components? And I wanted to know about not just myself, but me and my students wanted to know, is it possible to reduce the time burden without removing judgment? So this area is still developing. When I joined the learning community, I noticed that many people were in disciplines where it appeared that AI could be implemented almost immediately. And they had different ways where from day one, it looked like they were able to get a response from students and integrate that in their courses. On my end, when we were provided with the list of different AI apps that we could use, I struggled with how I would be able to implement this in my course, given the type of course that it is. So looking at evaluation reports and then potentially determining eligibility and writing a present level of performance. So what I did with my students was I did provide them the same list of apps that could be used. And then I also gave them the option of using ChatGPT, which they were already familiar with. And I did this on purpose because as a former teacher, I have to model good teaching practices, which is differentiation by student choice. So I allowed them to choose which apps they wanted to use. They also chose which disability classifications they wanted to focus on and which types of assessments would be appropriate to interpret based off of those disabilities. I will say most of my students chose ChatGPT as opposed to the other apps because it just made sense to them and they were already familiar with ChatGPT. One of the components that we looked at was refining language. A big component of the class is being able to not only interpret evaluation reports, but be able to communicate with parents in a parent-friendly manner. So parents may not always understand the language that we use in K-12 settings, and they just truly want to understand how their child is performing compared to peers that are the same age or same grade as them, and or also how they can support their child at home or get them the services that they may need outside of school in addition to what the school may offer. So we explored AI. Most of my students did use ChatGPT. There were some guidelines and some boundaries around using AI. I still wanted teachers to engage with pre-service teachers to be able to engage with understanding students' needs and whether or not a student would be eligible based off of the Individuals with Disability Education Act's guidelines. At the same time, I wanted to see how once they understood if a student demonstrated need with a sample report, if AI would support them with writing intensive tasks, so writing those present levels of performance, and if it would may be done with accuracy. And then in addition to that, AI is here to stay. So helping them and preparing them to be able to be AI literate in the future, as I'm sure many apps and other forms of AI will become available in the coming years. So overall, my students did say that they recognized that using AI could support workload management. They found it helpful for drafting and organizing a present level of performance, but they didn't believe it was sufficient on its own. A lot of them mentioned that they felt that they had to keep prompting in order to be able to get a reasonable draft. So that was kind of something that we discussed around whether or not this would be appropriate to use in the future. And for the most part, they still said yes. To give you all a little bit more context, I know I gave just a little bit of the background around a special education teacher's workload. During the school day, teachers usually have two 45-minute preps or maybe two 30-minute preps, and then a 30 to 45-minute lunch break. So when you think about everything that has to be done, in addition to what I'm presenting here, I want us to look at it in that context when we think about workload management. What ends up happening for a lot of teachers, especially special education teachers, is that sometimes work ends up being taken home or they're working on weekends. So being able to have tools that allow them to maximize the workday and reduce burnout was really important, or potentially reduce burnout was really important. There were also some concerns around using AI. There were questions about appropriate use, concerns about authorship and over-reliance, and unclear professional boundaries. So students still wanted the interpretations to be original, to be data-driven, as opposed to ChatGPT just giving random responses. So kind of thinking about the prompting that had to take place. There were just concerns about a teacher that might be tight on time, might have to adhere to federal deadlines, possibly copying and pasting without fully understanding what the evaluation is actually saying. There were also concerns about student sensitivity. So in my class, I had sample evaluation reports from Pearson and from other assessments that would be used when determining if a child is eligible for special education services. So they were able to just take those reports and use them in ChatGPT. Typically, this would not be allowed for the most part as actual in-service teachers with real student data. So there were definitely concerns about the confidentiality and how currently AI may not be designed for protected data. And keep in mind, this was done last spring, 2025, and this past fall. So I worked on this with two courses. And then there were also concerns around district capacity. So if they wanted to use AI to support their workload, what are the district policies around this? And will there be uneven access across those systems? And then also concerns about the implementation not being equitable. So that goes back to if some districts allow AI usage and others don't, would this be equitable in terms of meeting student needs, in terms of interpreting what the evaluation report says, in terms of who's able to have a reduced workload with the help of AI versus others? So these were the type of concerns that students expressed. And I will wrap up with saying that this area is still developing in K-12 special education. It's not well established, but many of us do believe that there is a need to reduce teacher burnout, and AI could be a tool for that. Policies and practices are still emerging, and teacher preparation must remain responsive. So I touched on this very early in the presentation that AI is here to stay. And one of my objectives was ensuring that teachers eventually become AI literate, because in the future, AI will definitely be utilized in schools and special education processes. And so teachers will need to remain responsive to that, as well as teacher preparation programs. AI supports efficiency, but it cannot replace the educator responsibility of meeting individual needs. So teachers still need to be able to understand what the students' needs are and how we can provide access to support them and their growth. And AI supports the work, but it does not define the work. So we still need to remain student-centered, make sure that if we do use AI, that it actually is reflective of the whole child. Otherwise, we'll need to focus on the skill sets that are obtained through teacher prep programs and then determine eligibility that way. And so now I will take questions.